Abandoned after marriage, she came back with twins. What happened next shocked them all. Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's emotional roller coaster, tell me, where in the world are you watching me from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far our little storytelling family reaches. Now, imagine this: a cold billionaire, a humble neighbor, and a secret that took 3 years to walk back through the door with twins. What happens when love is buried beneath pride and comes back stronger than ever? You're about to find out. This isn't just a story of romance. It's about dignity, strength, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than betrayal. Stay with me till the end, because her final words might just change the way you look at love forever. Layla lived in the quiet shadows of a sprawling city, her brown skin glowing softly under the sunlight that filtered through the trees lining the street. Her hair, meticulously braided, framed a face full of kindness and quiet strength, a face that told stories of resilience and grace. She was a woman who carried herself with gentle dignity, the kind of presence that made neighbors nod respectfully but rarely draw near, because her world was wrapped in her own sacred space, caring for others more than herself. Next door lived Blake Anderson, a name spoken in boardrooms and whispered with awe, a billionaire, whose wealth was as immense as the coldness that encased his heart. Blake was a man driven by ambition and status, his eyes always fixed on the next conquest, his hands never still from clutching the reins of power. His world was steel and glass, far from the warmth of a simple touch or the softness of a whispered prayer. But while Blake ruled the empire outside, it was Layla who ruled the quiet, forgotten corner of his life, his mother's bedroom. The old woman, frail and bedridden, had become a ghost of herself. Her days a slow unraveling of memories and strength, lost in the shadows of her son's absence. Yet Layla came each day without complaint, her footsteps light, her voice a soothing melody that filled the cold, sterile room with a fragile kind of hope. Her hands were tender, strong in ways that money could never buy. She bathed the old woman carefully, her touch respectful like a sacred ritual. Every stroke of water, every gentle towel that dried delicate skin, was a silent promise to care for someone who the world had forgotten. When Layla fed her, the old woman's eyes sparkled with a moment of life, as if tasting not just the food, but the kindness that seasoned it. And when the old woman whispered prayers, Layla listened, never rushing, always present, offering a calm presence in a life that was otherwise filled with silence. The neighborhood saw only Layla's quiet smile and Blake's towering, distant figure, two worlds colliding yet never truly touching. But inside that room, Layla's devotion was a lifeline. She wasn't paid for this. Her salary was no fortune. She was paid in moments, moments when the old woman reached for her hand, moments when a faint smile broke through the clouds of pain, moments when life, despite everything, still breathed softly. Blake never noticed these moments, too consumed with his empire, his cold dealings, his ruthless climb. To him, his mother was a burden, a fading shadow to be kept out of sight and out of mind. But Layla saw something else. She saw the woman who had once loved fiercely, who had dreamed quietly, who now lay waiting for a touch of humanity. And so Layla stayed, a quiet guardian angel in the background of Blake's life, living her own story of strength behind the walls of his mansion, the world. Outside thundered with Blake's name and power, but inside, Layla's hands spoke louder than words ever could. With every bath, every meal, every prayer, she stitched a fragile hope into the fading life of a woman who had been forgotten by the very son she had raised. And as the days turned into weeks, Layla's heart grew heavy with a secret hope that one day, maybe Blake would see not just the empire he built, but the lives he left behind. The air in the room grew heavier with each passing day, not from illness alone, but from time slipping like sand between fragile fingers. Blake's mother, Eleanor Anderson, lay against a stack of pillows, her breath shallow, her body frail but her mind sharp, sharper than her son ever gave her credit for. She watched him from her bed whenever he visited, always in a rush, always checking his phone. speaking in clipped tones, as if even her dying breaths inconvenienced his empire. But she knew him. She had held him through boyhood fevers, watched him chase dreams before they turned into obsessions, and saw with aching clarity the man who had everything but felt nothing. Yet every time Layla entered the room, Eleanor saw something shift, not in Blake, but in the air around them. Layla didn't speak much in Blake's presence, but her presence alone grounded the space. She brought fresh flowers. She hummed when she bathed Eleanor. She prayed in soft whispers when the pain grew too much. And every time Blake's cold voice pierced the room, it was Layla's calm one that stitched it back together. One morning, as the rain tapped lightly against the window, Eleanor asked to speak to Blake alone. He stood at the foot of her bed, arms crossed, expression guarded. "Mother, what now?" he said flatly. She studied him. As if memorizing the face of a son, she feared she was losing, not to death, but to life lived without meaning. "Blake," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "do you ever stop to listen to the silence after you speak?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the hollowness inside you," she said, coughing softly. "You chase gold, Blake. But this woman, Layla, she carries the kind of wealth that can heal your soul." Blake stiffened. "Mother, if this is another attempt to play matchmaker, this isn't a game." "Son," she interrupted, eyes glistening, "I'm dying, and I know what I've seen. That girl, she loves without expecting anything. She gives where the world only takes. She is everything you are not, and everything you need." Blake's jaw tightened. "You want me to marry her?" "Yes," she said, tears welling. "I want to leave knowing you won't die alone. That someone good will still stand beside you when the boardrooms are empty and your empire turns silent." He turned away, hiding the emotion climbing his throat. "You think forcing me into a marriage will change who I am?" "No," she whispered, "but maybe. Just maybe it will remind you who you used to be." The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic sound of rain and the distant hum of monitors. Blake said nothing for a long time. His world had been forged in contracts, calculated risks, and cold ambition. Marriage was a move reserved for mergers, not miracles. But something in his mother's voice, tired, pleading, and hauntingly final, pierced even his steely heart. "I'll do it," he said finally, voice low, "but not for love." "Don't expect fairy tales, Mother." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I don't need fairy tales. I just need peace." Later that night, as Layla helped Eleanor settle into bed, she noticed a folded piece of paper resting on the nightstand. A handwritten note from Blake. "We marry Friday. Don't ask questions." Layla's hands trembled. She looked at Eleanor, whose eyes sparkled with a secret satisfaction. "Why?" Layla asked, breathless. Eleanor simply said, "Because even the coldest hearts can thaw. And someone has to light the fire." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, something far more powerful had just begun to rise. The bedroom was cloaked in golden shadows, the flicker of candles painting soft warmth across the cold, modern lines of the penthouse suite. Layla stood quietly near the window, her silhouette framed by the city lights beyond, nervous, uncertain, yet glowing in the soft ivory of her wedding dress. She had expected nothing tonight. A quiet agreement, a distant husband, a bed shared in silence, if at all. Yet when Blake entered the room, something in him felt different. He wasn't the ruthless billionaire whose words could slice like glass. Tonight, he was something quieter, less armored. He stopped in the doorway, eyes fixed on her not with critique, but wonder. "You look beautiful," he said, the words escaping his lips as though they surprised even him. Layla turned, her breath catching at the tenderness she glimpsed in his usually guarded gaze. "Thank you," she replied softly, her voice barely louder than the rustling of her gown. There was a long, suspended silence between them, the kind that trembled with unspoken fears and fragile possibilities. Blake stepped closer, not with dominance but hesitation, as if afraid the moment would shatter. His hand reached for hers, and when their fingers met, it wasn't a command, it was a question. Layla's heart thudded gently, not out of fear, but something dangerously close to hope. He led her to the center of the room, where the bed waited, draped in satin and uncertainty. She expected coldness, but instead felt the slow unfolding of warmth. Blake's touch was unhurried, not possessive, but exploring. He brushed a stray braid behind her ear, his fingertips lingering a moment too long. "You don't have to pretend tonight," Layla whispered, eyes searching his. He shook his head. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending." She exhaled slowly, letting the tension in her shoulders melt as his hands slid to her waist, holding her as if she were made of porcelain, something rare and precious. Their breaths began to sink, the silence filling with a rhythm older than words. He kissed her, not with practiced seduction, but with a hesitant need to feel something real. Their lips met in slow motion. The kind of kiss that spoke apologies neither of them had said yet, and promises neither dared make. As he laid her gently onto the bed, his eyes never left hers. The sheets wrapped around them like a shield from the world. And for a night, Blake let his walls fall, not in grand declarations, but in quiet gestures, the way he held her close afterward, how he rested his forehead against hers, how he whispered her name like a prayer. Layla's heart betrayed her, blooming in the warmth of this unexpected tenderness. She had expected a transaction, a hollow performance, but what she received was something fragile, something dangerously close to love. As they lay entwined in the quiet, Blake traced the curve of her fingers with his, as if memorizing them. "You're not what I expected," he murmured into the stillness. "Neither are you," she said, a soft smile brushing her lips. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual indifference, but in that dimly lit room, two unlikely hearts found a sliver of connection. It wasn't just desire that filled the space, it was the ache of two souls brushing against the possibility of being seen. Layla, tucked into the crook of his arm, allowed herself for the first time since the wedding to imagine a life beyond sacrifice. Blake, watching the slow rise and fall of her breath, felt something shift deep inside, something unsettling but not unwelcome. It was only one night, one breathless, golden, whispered night, but it changed everything, or so she believed. Morning sunlight filtered through silk curtains, warm and golden, but Layla woke alone. The space beside her was cold, untouched, and the echo of last night's tenderness had vanished like a dream, too good to be true. She sat up slowly, the ache in her chest spreading as silence, replaced the soft whispers that had filled the room hours before. Blake had already left, no note, no glance back. The man who had held her like she was something sacred now moved through the house like she didn't exist. Days blurred into weeks. He stopped joining her at the dinner table, passed her in the hall with blank eyes. His voice, if it came at all, was flat, clipped, devoid of warmth. But Layla, though bruised by his indifference, refused to let bitterness bloom. She didn't chase him. She didn't beg for attention. Her love, her goodness, had never been a transaction. She continued her quiet rituals, tending to Eleanor each morning, massaging her tired legs, brushing her silver hair, whispering soft encouragement when pain overtook her. "You're glowing." "Sweetheart," Eleanor would say, not knowing Layla's glow came from the battle between heartbreak and hope. The house, once tense, found moments of peace in Layla's presence. Yet Blake remained a shadow, distant, cold, almost cruel in how deliberately he ignored her. Then came Eleanor's birthday. The grand estate was transformed into a palace of glittering lights. Waiters in tuxedos, gold-trimmed invitations sent to every media house, every shareholder, every family name worth a headline. Layla wore a simple yet elegant dress, her braids pinned delicately, eyes soft with nervous anticipation. This was Eleanor's day. Layla told herself she'd smile through it. For the woman who had shown her kindness. Guests filled the ballroom, chandeliers gleamed, champagne flowed, laughter echoed. Blake stood tall in a black-tailored suit, all charm and sharp edges. Cameras clicked, speeches were made. Then, with all eyes on him, Blake took the microphone. Layla smiled faintly from her corner, assuming he'd honor his mother. But instead, his gaze cut through the room, cold, deliberate, and landed on her. "Before we toast," he said smoothly, "I need to clear the air about something." The crowd quieted. Layla's smile faltered. "This woman," he said, motioning toward her without warmth, "trapped me into marriage. This wasn't love, it was manipulation. I did it for my mother." "Nothing more," gasps echoed. A few whispered. Some glanced at Layla with pity. Others with scandal-hungry curiosity. Blake pulled a sleek folder from his jacket and held it up. Divorce papers signed, effective immediately. The room stood still. The chandelier flickered slightly, as if reacting to the cruelty in the air. Layla's heart clenched, but her spine remained straight. Her hands, trembling slightly, never moved to cover her face. Her eyes shimmered, but no tear fell. "Not here, not now!" She walked forward slowly, each step echoing louder than the murmurs that rippled behind her. She didn't take the papers. She didn't speak. She simply looked at Blake, not in anger, not in defeat, but with a depth of pain that only silence can hold. He couldn't meet her eyes. Cowardice often hides behind arrogance. With one last breath, Layla turned and walked out, her heels tapping against marble like a soft goodbye. Her tears held behind a curtain of dignity no betrayal could steal. Outside the night was cold, but inside her, something had just begun to burn. 3 years had passed like shifting tides, quiet on the surface but violent beneath. Blake Anderson had returned to his world of mergers and empires, rebuilding his image, burying every trace of the woman he once cast aside. Publicly he was polished, perfect. Privately he was colder, more controlled, his heart encased in steel. Now, on this glittering evening, the ballroom of the Grand Marlowe Hotel was ablaze with celebration. Crystal chandeliers bathed the elite in soft light. Violins played a gentle waltz. And Blake stood beside his new bride-to-be, an heiress of oil and name, another calculated choice. Champagne flowed. Photographers flashed. The engagement was not of love, but legacy. Guests toasted to fortune, smiling for headlines. But just as Blake raised his glass, the crowd's cheer began to falter. A hush spread like fire through dry grass. Heads turned. Cameras paused mid-click. Whispers rose and fell. And then silence. At the entrance, standing against the golden glow of the open doors, was Layla. Not the quiet girl from the past, but a woman transformed. Her dress shimmered like stardust, her posture regal, her gaze unflinching. But it wasn't just her that stole the breath from the room. It was the 2 small hands gripping hers. On either side stood 2 children, no older than 3. A boy and a girl, their braided curls and deep eyes eerily familiar. The same silver-gray irises, the same delicate curve of the chin. The crowd gasped as realization hit. Blake's eyes stared back at him from 2 tiny faces. The heiress beside him faltered. A murmur rolled like thunder. Blake's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble. "No," he whispered, stepping forward, disbelief storming across his face. Layla didn't flinch. She moved slowly down the aisle, between glittering gowns and stunned stares. Every step a declaration. Her children walked proudly beside her, one holding a toy piano, the other a small sketchbook, symbols of innocence, echoes of the love he had once mocked. When she reached the center of the room, she stopped. Her voice rang clear, no tremble, no fear. 3 years ago, she began, you stood before strangers and tore my name apart. You handed me shame wrapped in silence. Blake's mouth opened, but no words came. His fiancée backed away, unsure whether to stay or flee. I said nothing then, Layla continued, eyes burning into his. Not because I was weak, but because I knew truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. The children looked up at her, unaware of the storm swirling around them. You thought you erased me, she said, her tone sharpening. But you planted something stronger than hate. You gave me them. Gasps echoed again. The weight of scandal hung heavy, but Layla stood untouched. You never asked why I left. You never searched. You moved on because I was inconvenient. Blake's voice finally cracked through the tension. Why didn't you tell me? Layla's jaw tightened. Because I didn't owe you more pain than you gave. I chose peace. I chose them. She looked down at her children, then back at the room full of power-hungry eyes. But make no mistake, she said. Fire now glowing in her words. I was silent once. Not anymore. Her final words echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. She turned, her children following her as the crowd parted, some in awe, some in guilt, and others in silent applause. Blake stood rooted, shattered not by scandal but by truth. Not by the children he never met, but by the woman he had underestimated and who had now returned, not to seek revenge but to reclaim her power. The storm outside mirrored the one inside. Blake's chest as he sat alone in his study, the remnants of shattered pride scattered like glass across the floor of his life. The engagement was called off hours ago. The heiress had left with quiet disgust. But his mind wasn't on business deals or headlines. It was on her, Layla, and the children. Their faces haunted him, not just for their resemblance, but for the years he lost, the laughter he missed, the first steps he hadn't seen. That night, Layla agreed to speak, on her terms. She sat across from him in the sunroom of his estate, her presence calm but untouchable. "You want the truth?" she asked, her voice like silk pulled over steel. "Then listen without interruption." Blake nodded for once, not as a man used to being obeyed, but as one desperate to understand. She began slowly, voice steady. "The night you left me humiliated in front of the world, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't run from you. I protected them from a father who didn't know how to love." Her words cut deep, but she continued without pity. "I went back to nothing. No money, no roof, but I had one thing, purpose. I scrubbed dishes, played piano in cafes, tutored kids after school. I carried them through every storm. I didn't raise your children, I raised mine." Blake swallowed hard, shame swelling in his throat. "And the center?" he asked quietly. Layla gave a soft smile, eyes distant. "I started it in memory of Eleanor. She used to say, 'Kindness doesn't need an audience.' So I built a space where the forgotten are seen, where dignity is medicine. It's called Eleanor House." Her voice faltered just slightly, the only crack in her composure. Blake sat stunned. "You did all that alone?" She looked him in the eye. "Not alone, with love, with grace, with a fire you tried to extinguish but only made stronger." He leaned forward, guilt staining every line of his face. "Layla, I didn't know." She paused, then reached into her bag and slid across an envelope, worn, unopened. "Your mother left this. I found it after she passed. She'd written it for you." Blake's fingers trembled as he opened it, the familiar script of his mother's handwriting, pulling 1,000 memories back. The letter was short, but it broke him. "Blake, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I forced you to marry Layla, yes, but not because she was kind to me. Because she's the one thing you never had the courage to love, goodness. Don't let your fear destroy something real. She won't wait forever." Blake blinked hard, the words a knife to the chest. "I never opened it," he whispered. "I thought it was guilt. I thought she was wrong." Layla stood, gathering her bag, her voice gentle but resolute. "You thought a lot of things, but I lived through the truth." She walked to the door, but before leaving she looked back. "This isn't revenge, Blake. This is me, finally being seen." The door clicked softly behind her, and Blake remained in the silence, holding the letter like a lifeline he'd let slip too long. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt human, and painfully aware that the love he once dismissed had become the strength that outshined everything he had built. The sky was pale with dawn light as Blake stood on Layla's porch. No cameras, no suits, no entourage. Just a man stripped of everything but regret. His knees hit the ground as she opened the door, her children blinking behind her, still in soft morning clothes. "I don't deserve to ask," Blake began, voice raw, "but I'm asking anyway. Forgive me for not seeing you, for not seeing them, for not seeing me until it was too late." The words didn't come easy. He wasn't used to begging. But this wasn't business. This was soul deep. Layla said nothing for a moment, the weight of 3 years hanging between them like a fragile thread. Her twins clung to her hands, quiet, curious. Blake's eyes flicked to them and his voice broke. "I've missed birthdays, first steps, first words, and I will never forgive myself for that." He looked up at her, not as the ruthless billionaire, but as a father, stripped and shaken. "But if you let me, even on the outside, I want to be part of their world, and maybe earn a place in yours again." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of memories, heartbreak, strength. Layla looked at him long and deep, and then she gently stepped outside, the twins following. She didn't answer, not with a yes, not with a no. She simply began walking. The early morning breeze caught the hem of her coat, her braided hair catching the light like strands of armor. Blake didn't follow. He watched, respectfully, reverently, like a man witnessing. The kind of strength he used to scoff at, now humbled by its quiet force. The twins looked up at their mother. "Is Daddy coming home?" the little girl asked. Layla paused. She bent down, looked her children in the eyes with a calm fierceness, and spoke, not for them, not for Blake, but for every woman who had ever been broken and rebuilt herself, piece by glowing piece. "You don't need someone to complete you," she said, her voice steady and full of grace. "You need someone who won't break you when you're already whole." The words drifted into the wind, soft but unforgettable. Behind her, Blake stood motionless, not with defeat, but with awe. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as the neighbor, not as the wife he never appreciated, but as a woman who rose from ashes without needing to burn anyone in return. Whether she would ever return to him or not, it didn't matter. Layla had already won, because love wasn't a second chance. It was knowing when not to beg for one. And as she walked into the sunrise, two small hands in hers, and the future wide open before her. The story ended not with a reunion, but with freedom.